We'll start. I don't know if the audio is on already. Welcome everybody. Alessandro, is everything okay? Okay. Welcome everybody to this today's Tavola Aperta, which is this special project that Christine Massel wanted for this year's Biennale, together with the artist practice video and Unpacking My Library. Our guest today is Erika Verzutti, and so welcome, and welcome everybody. I hope we'll have a nice conversation. It's a lunch, it's supposed to be relaxed and convivial, so don't feel shy, even though I will ask you to use the microphones for when you speak, because otherwise in streaming nobody can hear anything. Erika is exhibiting this year at the Biennale. Is this your first time at the Venice Biennale?
Yeah.
Okay. And she has two main works. One is Turtle, which is a gigantic sculpture in the Corderia in the Pavilion of the Earth. And the other is a pet symmetry at the Giardino delle Vergini in the Pavilion of Time and Infinity. So I would like to start just asking you to tell us something about these two works, maybe by starting to tell us why you chose to bring these two works to the Biennale.
I think there's a connection between the two works that was not foreseen, but they're all animals, so to speak, like they're representations of animals. So we have like a turtle inside and many animals in the garden outside. And the turtle, I was not thinking about the animal, like it was not my main motivation to do animals. But the animals are like, sometimes it happens, or all the time it happens in my work, that I can work from any excuse. So the animal is a very simple excuse that we tend to be open to, like sculptures of animals, as it would be of human beings, of human body. But the main motivation for the turtle sculpture is sculpture, because I'm always trying to find structures that are very simple, that like when a child first faces a piece of clay, they will make like the snakes and ashtrays and animals. And I'm trying to keep myself connected to that type of very essential sculpture, to explore the importance of sculpture itself. So the turtle, I've done some much smaller turtles before, but it's a very simple structure that is like 4 paws. They're normally like 4 stones with a stone on top. It's even something you can find in primitive sculpture, like this structure. They could be 3, like 3 would do. If we have 3 paws and one thing on top, it would stand. But here we went for 4 because there was some connection to the architecture. We have like 4 columns in the space, so I wanted to have some symmetry between the piece and the architecture. And I'm not very, I don't respond very well. I mean, I don't mainly respond to architecture, but I believe in exhibitions still as some encounter between the public and the viewer and the artist. I think the exhibition is like a meeting point. So I do believe in exhibitions, because it's something to think about. Yeah. Sometimes you wonder, does it all make sense, like to have an art exhibition? And also because these days we see much more images than work in the flesh. So we're all like thinking of producing an Instagram picture when you're making a work. Yeah. But there is something that only happens in the physical encounter. So that's something that I tend to be aware of, and that's my relation to architecture. Is more about the encounter place than the. Yeah. And the garden, of course, it's a totally different situation.
Yeah, the garden is completely different as a.
The garden is a present. Like in the Arsenale, you have to kind of deal with the other works, and I always, we were talking earlier, and I think by now, I confess that I feel that the work in the Arsenale, compared to the garden, it feels like a caged animal. It feels a little bit restrained. And that's a result of the experience. Maybe I would have done it smaller, I don't know. But that's also, it's very explicit as a result of the experience of the work that was done by there. And in the pet cemetery, really, I went there today to see how the installation worked. We went there today together. Because I was a little bit concerned that after, it's hard to make work that to stay outside. Hard because you have to deal with problems that, you know, I don't like so much to deal with problems like the rain and the wind. It's not the most fun part.
We also had a hurricane here.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So
it survived.
I think it's fine. Yeah. So no, but then the garden is a different experience because it feels like today I saw it. It feels like the sculptures have been there, and that's very much the sort of experience that I had, like in a fantasy of. Like to create a place that have been there before. Have people, I mean, has everybody got to the garden? Or maybe, because that's something.
Some yes or some no, I suppose.
Yeah,
no, the garden is incredible because they're sort of, the sculptures look as if they were there in the past, I don't know, 100 years. Or a couple of years. Well, 100 is maybe too much because they're still quite perfect.
Yeah,
but
they've been there for 20 years.
And it seems sort of a real pet cemetery, not something done as an artwork.
Yeah. and also, like, if you, for a moment, you believe it's a pet cemetery, the next moment you doubt it, because there's something weird going on, because it's not a real cemetery. So, it's I have a lot to say about the pet cemetery. It's a shame that people missed it. But I did the first pet cemetery. Hello.
Hello. Please sit down.
I had done a pet cemetery years ago, like 10 years ago. And people, even here, people were asking me about my cat, saying, "Oh, did you do this all because of your cat?" And more or less. Because I was really impressed by this thing of having a pet and the type of attachment you develop, knowing that the animal is going to die soon. Yeah. The cat is still alive. She's 18 years now. And I've done 2 pet cemeteries.
It's the one that's filmed in the artist practice video, right?
And there is some, like art is dealing with life and death all the time. So this relation to the death of animal is already a negotiation, because it's something you can face and tap into easier than talking about death. So it's kind of a partial approach to the idea of death. So, and then, just to finish this, and then I realized that people did pet cemeteries, like that they existed. And more importantly than the death and the drama, it is what got me was the idea that a cemetery, any cemetery, is a display of sculptures. And that they can be really freestyle, because if you go into a cemetery, you're gonna deal with like a very unprotected, like anything is allowed. So I got myself in this situation of the cemetery to be able to try different things and to say, okay, if it was a cemetery, I would do free of like the contemporary art context. I would do like in a freestyle setup frame to work with sculpture. And again, to think about sculpture, as I was saying, and then these two meet, like the work, the outside work and the turtle work, that in the end they're thinking about sculpture, not really cats.
That's what changed from because the first pet cemetery you did was in 2008.
2008.
What changed? What changed?
I think it's more synthetic now. It's simpler because I've done it before, so I had less surprises and more intimacy with the making. I could focus more in the making than in the idea. The first one was quite exuberant, because I invited friends to do collaborations with me, because I really took it as a chance to not to do sculpture that looks like my sculpture. So I had a chance to play like with the genre of sculpture. There is sculpture that is more geometric, things that I wouldn't be in the context of my vocabulary. So inviting other artists to do things together in the other one was a very nice experience to this, because they would have like their input, their language, and everything, anything would fit, because it was a cemetery. So yeah, and people were a bit scared at the time of the exhibition, because it was in a gallery space, a big one, but even so people say this is too crowded, which is a very maybe Latin American way of seeing things, that you have to be like elegant and have space, because the main feedback I got is, this is too crowded, that's too much, there's too many sculptures. I say, yeah, that's the point.
It's not minimal enough.
Exactly. So it was good to try these things, like to have a crowded show. And here is very, it's not crowded. It's quite a nice place to get. When you get, like, you can really like float from one sculpture to the other. But dealing with genre of sculpture, like style, which is such a complicated word, was something that it was very exciting to me. See, you know, I can play with the idea of style, because we have this thing that we expect some style from each artist. We expect some colors, some kind of looks. So being able to mess around with that a bit was good. Yeah. Here, everything is more like my style. I think after 10 years, you know, like.
Is it not your style?
I think it is. Maybe that's the change. That's the just thinking now. I mean, you asked what changed. Maybe here it's not so much about. Maybe in 10 years I incorporated more freedom to my own style. So I feel like this is all very different, but it could be mine. It's not like I'm not faking other identities as I was. Maybe I don't need that as strongly anymore. Yeah.
Also, the turtle also a bit changed, because you did a lot of turtles, I think.
Yeah, I did turtles
and
again and
what
again.
impressed me in this one is the dimension.
Yeah.
I think, at least I saw all the other ones in photographs, but they look much smaller. I don't know if that's
no,
true,
this is
or
much bigger. But this is also me trying to be very explicit about the biennial thing, because there is some emotion and some expectation and some like biennial effect. I think it happens. It's very hard to escape it. So I try to be very explicit and upfront with it. You know, like this is this biennalistic scale to this, but we can be very fun. Like if you know that you're going for it. I try to make it very transparent that I was doing an enlarged, giganticized kind of sculpture. Again, about the encounter, because it's generous, like to say, you see, this is a big deal, and this is something that I brought for you. It's like, you know, the way you present yourself to the public, and there is some grandiousness to it, which is a very tricky thing. But the way that I'm trying to do it, I is trying to be very open about it and to embrace it, which is very hard, you know. And as I would say, maybe I would have done it a little bit smaller.
Yeah, also because one thing I noticed looking at it, probably the small ones, when you look at them, you see them in a certain sense from the top.
Yeah.
And this one is exactly
like
eye level.
Eye level.
So you don't have that top view, and you don't see exactly how it is over.
Yeah, it's true.
The top part.
Yeah.
So I think the perception of the sculpture in itself changes
it's totally
completely.
different. Yeah, it's totally
so
different.
So you see
it
the
is,
massiveness.
It's something that you cannot quite grasp.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because you don't get it. You cannot like embrace the object and wrap it and take it home and, you know, like understand it quickly. You have like to go around and try to, your mind has to complete the parts so that you have the image. And I think my main motivation to that is because the turtle has its eggs on top.
Yeah.
And the idea of making like very big eggs was was irresistible. You know, saying like, okay, so this time I'm gonna have like eggs that are like this, like dinosaur eggs. And the egg again is like it's such an essential shape.
Yeah.
After working with fruits a lot, that I've worked with fruit casts a lot, I went to egg, like after having worked with so much texture, I went to egg as like the most synthetic shape that is. And it also feels like it could retch into anything.
Yeah.
That's something I like about the egg very much, because it keeps some tension as if like something could hatch. And yeah, but I agree, this is totally different. This has some installational relate to it. Maybe because of my fear of making an object and presenting only an object that could be like wrapped up by the mind too easily. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
I just have a follow-up because you were talking about size, and I saw the drawing you made for turtle, and it's a beautiful drawing, by the way.
Yeah, the drawing.
It's beautiful, but the drawing has several turtles, different
Yeah.
sizes. So what happened that you didn't do that?
I didn't have enough space.
Right.
I was, yeah, it was true, because because there is always a vision when I'm going to make an exhibition. I tend to grab the first vision. Normally works, like the first impulse. So I thought turtles, like paws with the columns. But then I thought there would be like many of them, and I had that space. So I made it as big as I could inside that space. Group shows. Yeah.
Yes, please.
You did explain why you used animals, but why specifically a turtle? I mean, is there some mythology involved, some local story which has made you take the choice of a turtle? I mean, in Hindu mythology, for example, a turtle is a very important thing because they say that the world is on top of the turtle. So there's a story behind that, yeah.
That's beautiful.
So is there something which you used?
No, not at all. I'm using, no, I shouldn't like try to make it up, but it is, as I said, it could be like, if it was a snake, it would be because like kids do snakes like this. But I know about the turtle as much as a kid knows about the snake. You know, I'm really like, what I'm connected to is this simplicity of shapes like that are very simple to put together. But I wouldn't know. No, that's very nice. Yeah.
I think also the turtle.
Christine likes turtles a lot, she said.
Really?
But she has something.
I wanted to ask you before, did you discuss with Christine what work you would bring to the...
She had seen a turtle.
Okay.
She likes turtles a lot. We started talking about turtles. And I got the turtles stuck to my mind. Yeah. It was like a very easy conversation that gave me gave me like this irresistible wish.
Also, the turtle is nice because it's a sort of, it has the house of the turtle is a sculpture in itself.
Yeah.
But it's also very tactile because your work is extremely tactile.
Yeah, it is tactile. And I always wanted to be very tactile, like by the eye. Like the eye can feel what the hand would. And so the shades and carves and shapes are normally done to get this tactile feeling to the eye, not necessarily. I don't mind if people touch it. But of course I don't. But I'm happier when I can like get some tactile experience on the eye. And something I was thinking about, like just before I came here, is that when we have these conversations, like you just asked me about the context of the choice now, I always think like people are gonna ask me, why do I do this? Like what's my motivation and what's the context? Many times like, you know, I'm talking about something that is some context. And in the context, like the art making is very fragile. Like I have this feeling that the importance of art is very fragile. It can be very super important and it can be meaningless in a minute. You can really see everything for a minute, for a moment you can see everything as a commodity or entertainment or a luxury or an elite type of language. And I am a believer of the importance of art no matter what, like in any circumstances, in any context. So the apparent lack of context, like not being connected to any context is very important to me. Like so when every time I say no, I don't know what the turtle is about, or could be any animals, but could be another thing. Because what I think is my real motivation when I'm looking at is some independence of art for its own, as bad as it can sound, but like because I really believe that it's something that holds art together, even when you're not in conditions to believe it, like when the world is very hard. Like in Brazil, we have like a horrible political scenario right now. And so in any circumstances, I think that mystery of what holds art together, despite what the context is something that really moves me. So that's why I'm trying to lay low and find these essential childlike ways of moving. And so that's something that I feel good saying this, because otherwise it feels like, you know, I'm talking about cats and animals and child sculpture. But there is actually, I feel a very strong power of this autonomy of art, basically.
Yes, please.
Hi. I don't know if this question is maybe a speculation, but talking about what you were saying, you're giving through your work a strong message of long life. So eggs are the symbol of life somehow. And the turtle too is an animal that is the symbol of a longevity, of a very long life. On the other hand, the cemetery of cats, that are the animals that, at least in our Italian tradition, are the ones that have 7 lives, 9 lives. So somehow is again another way to stress out life. So as you just said, probably the animal you chose was not specifically for the animal, but on the other hand, you give a very strong message of life. So you were just saying now how important art is, no matter what. So we were wondering, and again, tell us if it's probably a speculation, but on the other hand, through a psychoanalytic point of view, you give a message of it's not by chance, you give a message of life. So we were wondering if somehow your art is a way to go through death. And of course, the body death is something we cannot skip, but on the other hand, it's a way to avoid the psychological, the mind death that you're giving through this work.
Yeah, I like that very much. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to take notes.
This is true.
Yeah, I'm going to write it down. That's very nice.
No, I don't know.
No, I think that art, one of the things that art does is give us longevity. I think it does. Because it does to the artist, because the artist can survive. And it does to human beings through art. Like this notion of beating art, death a little bit, like, and going beyond it and staying. And yeah, it definitely is something in the superpowers that I believe that art has. Is this sensation of dealing with death in some way. You're kind of winning sometimes. Yeah, and I like that very much. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? When did you decide to turn to art? Because I know you studied industrial design before studying art.
I studied design because it was, when I went to college, it was totally absurd to go to art school. Because there was no, it was not a profession, you know. You would go to art school only if you wanted to become a teacher of art in primary school or something. So it was very absurd, and I needed a job. And I knew I wanted to do something visual, but I needed to have like a profession. And so I went to design school, but I didn't like it. So, and I never worked with design. Then I started going to some workshops that they were available all the time because the art market was inexistent. And the advantage was that very nice artists would be teaching. And in workshops that would be making that for a living. So I started going to see these people and spend some time there.
Were they sculptors?
Sculptors, painters. I did some like sculptural workshop and also painting. I have a strong relation to painting, which is weird, but I do. I don't think I can be a painter, but I relate to painting very strongly as a reference of what can we do, because for me it's the hardest thing. Like, so what can you do? For me, painting has like a timeline of human achievement, I think. So I always relate to paintings, to painters very seriously, like to as a way of thinking, as a philosophy. And yeah, so I was doing this and that, and started to organize me and some friends, I started to organize small shows in any space given. So for many years it was like this, just like organizing some shows, doing some stuff. It really took me a while to be able to work and do this.
But then you went to London to study?
10 years after. Yeah. 10 years after I got a scholarship. That was a very lucky thing that they had at the time. And I went to London for 2 years. And it, for me, it totally changed the game. I think really changed the game. And I literally lost everything I had because I had like a conceptual practice that would fit very well in the conditions I had. It was very arty, as people would say. Like I was doing what for me feels like another life. I was doing like a conceptual work that really looked like contemporary art. So I like really took the chance to like give up all that because it felt totally fake to me. Like I was trying to make some art. And then I didn't know what to do if I was not trying to make something that looks like art. So sculpture, and then when I went to school, I did like the most horrible work you can imagine. I don't even have it, the work that I did at school. So for 3-4 years, I couldn't do anything decent. Then after that period, I went back to Brazil, and it took me a while to recover. And then sculpture really saved me. I found this thing about sculpture being very essential, straightforward, because sculpture is here in the same space, and our perception of 3-dimension is that 3-dimension is reality. So I took it as a given, and I say, okay, I'll start here, from the very basics. But I want to do something that is honest, like that I'm really doing, that I'm not trying to do something that looks like something smart. So it was like, if you're really like I don't know, I felt like I went to a meditation period, you know, something like really to find the essence of, and then I could start working again, slowly.
It works,
Okay,
I think.
works. I would like to ask you something. As I saw both the pet cemetery and the turtle, and it was interesting to see the differences between the two artworks. And so I was thinking, as one is more site-specific somehow than the other. But when you decide that a work is finished, related to what? You know, when you say, that's ready and I'm not going to touch it anymore, because, you know, the cemetery has, you know, a structure that you have to build somehow and maybe do something. So I was curious about that.
Well, as painters say, it's ready when it does cling, it does something. You never know when it's going to be. Like, it has to, I don't know, it really sparkles like, ding, it does this. So it's a conversation that you have. Like, I tend to work, like even the pet cemetery, I didn't work with a group of things. I didn't work with the installation. I work, and that's the way I like to work, with each sculpture at a time. So when I'm working with, and it's normally one body that I'm working with, maybe because all this struggle that I've been through, it's me and in the work. And it's normally one lump, one thing. And it's a conversation, really. Like, you say something, the work says something back. So you go take a walk, and you come back, and you say something back. And the work shows you something. When I say the work talks, we know that the work doesn't talk. But it's through language. And that's something that I really believe. Like, you do a stroke here, and you know, and then the work says, like, no, this is not working. Like, this is not this. It's a conversation. It's like this internal, crazy language, unverbal conversation with the work. And from that conversation, at one point, you know it, if it's, you know, if it's there or not. And sometimes it won't get done. Sometimes. That's why I have the cemeteries of cemeteries. Because there is like, there is the piece on the floor, there is all these broken pieces, blah, blah, blah. That is where the lizards are now. There are things that didn't work out. And so sometimes they don't work. And I put them all on the corner. And sometimes I had a corner full of interesting things, and I should just put them all together. And then I clean my studio because I can put everything out and start again. And it starts, how do you say this? Accumulating again.
Yeah.
And because sometimes they don't work. And you have to know that, you know. And you have to be, sometimes it hurts because you really want everything to work. And so when I did the cemeteries, I felt like, I got it now, you know, like, you cannot beat me, because if you don't work, I put it on the cemetery and it works the same way. Because I try to be a bit lucky with the work, I think. I think it's part of the type of, I try to make my work easy for myself. And some people don't, but I mean, for me, I think it makes sense that it's easy. Yeah, I love talking about this. Like, when works are ready, it's fun.
How many people work with you, or do you work alone?
No, I work with some people. I work with my brother all the time, for years now, because he's a very good maker.
Okay.
And he's much stronger than me. So I do like big stuff because I work with him. Otherwise, I don't know exactly if I would be so bold, because I know he's there all the time. So say, let's lift this, let's push this. So I work with my brother all the time, and with some other assistants. Like, sometimes we need more people. Like, to do this turtle here, it was me, my brother, my niece's friend, another 2 art students.
So the whole
family and friends of the family. Yeah, it's very much a family business. It's a funny thing.
I found that very striking that you work with your brother, but I also read that you work at home. Are you still doing that?
No, I changed.
Okay.
I moved to a studio finally. I used to work at home until like 3 years ago. And I didn't want to have a studio because I was scared of paying the rent. But then a friend pushed me, saying, no, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And I moved, and that was a good move. Like, I feel like a grown-up now. Yeah.
Do you still work at night?
Not so much anymore, because of the studio. Yeah, I had a friend who would say, don't rent a studio, you never go. You never go, it's gonna be a waste. But then I had to adjust, really. And it feels good, it feels good. I don't wake up early, but when I do, I feel like, oh, this is so good. You know, why don't I do it more often? No, I normally go in the afternoon. And I can spend long times without going to the studio sometimes. For the same reasons that I didn't have like good work for 4 years. I think I need like some breaks to get back to the thing.
And do you do, please go
So
ahead.
going back to the symbolism, you said for both the egg and the turtle, they have shells, so they're very protective. And the turtle seems like, I think of a tortoise, which is maybe 300 years old, and the egg is at the very beginning of life. So there's this stretching from the very beginning of life to the end of life, and then death afterwards. So those things come to mind. That just to explore the symbolism. And then, did you say that in the beginning when you did the it was a pet cemetery, that you had other people designing some of the tombs or sculptures, and then the last one you did them yourself? Is that right?
is so, and I'm curious about that because it seems like there's a tendency maybe these days to have more and more participative work. That seems like it. And of course, it depends on one's experience and perception and all that. And you're going sort of, it sounds like
I'm going backwards.
in the opposite, not backwards, but just in a different direction.
In a different
I'm curious
direction.
about that.
Yeah, I see. Thank you so much that you people are psychoanalyzing my work. No, it's so good because I say it's true. Whoa.
I think
Yeah. No, I love this thing. It's so obvious. It's in a way, like, it's not worth saying, but I never put it in that way, that you have the egg on top that is like life before it begins, and the turtle is this ancient, old, like, yeah, that's nice.
I think I'd like to maybe give a juxtaposition. Obviously, I'm not trying to impose, it's how I feel, how I react to the work as opposed to meaning, and I was very sensitive to what you said about why you chose a turtle and meanings. But to me, a giant turtle is problematic. It's a very difficult animal. I don't know if people remember Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's huge in popular culture. It led to a massive growth in turtle ownership. And they start off very small, but the problem with turtles is they actually don't die. They just get bigger. And so very few turtles, I'm wondering how much actually end up in pet cemeteries, to make a link between the two. And actually, off the Via Garibaldi, I don't know if people know the lovely, beautiful fountain, there are dozens of abandoned turtles just there. And just the idea of the giant turtle, it really, to me, poses the problematic of what do we do with giant turtles, when they stop becoming a pet and become a pest or a nuisance and become refuse, discarded and thrown away. So, psychoanalytically, everything has a different meaning, but I'm looking at the shadow side of the turtle and what a large turtle can represent, to look at maybe something darker or Jungian within that,
Yeah.
Just my own interpretation.
No, nice. No, this thing of like these associations, for instance, for the turtle, like the information people can bring about the turtle and the symbolism of the animal that is there, that I call an excuse, is in my sensation is that is a very appropriate way for an artwork to go around, because I think it's Duchamp that would say that an artwork, there is a formula that an artwork is what it is, plus or minus everything that can be said about it. And it goes back to the work. So we have like this flow of association around it. And for me, it's a perfect way because it doesn't close anywhere. Like, I really like the association of the turtle with the egg and longevity thing. Right? And I wasn't thinking about it. But it's happening now, since I've done some swans too. They're also very problematic, like because they're a plague, there are too many of them, and they're beautiful. The government wanted to kill the swans. I didn't know anything about that before.
Really?
I started messing with them, like I didn't know. But I liked, because the context then, like the associations you can make, they really they fluctuate around the work, I think. And yeah, I wouldn't know. And I have this thing that I put myself in a very privileged position of being allowed not to know a lot of things.
Well, since it's established that we are psychoanalyzing you,
yeah, thank you.
If I may.
Yeah.
Generic questions, really. How does an artist really get out of her zone of comfort? I mean, when you look at an established artist, for example, you know their genre of work by looking at it. You can see that, okay, here's a Rodin or here's a Picasso because that's the style. So how does an artist get out of their zone of comfort so that they make something which is so radically different that even they struggle to make it? If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Just getting back to the part of your question that is connected to this, about yours, that you were talking about the collaboration. When I was doing the collaborations, it was not like I was doing like one object, this, together with that artist. that artist has a style that everybody knows. So I was incorporating that artist style and doing something together, like a collaboration in one work. So this work, and this work would have 3 different styles. And you could kind of recognize the artists that were invited too. And I was trying to get rid of my own style, like to play with style, in the Pet Cemetery specifically, like try to get free from this style thing, like as if I could have any style, knowing that I cannot really, because when you started saying, how do you get out of your zone of comfort? Actually, I'm always trying to get in my comfort zone, which is so hard to get in your comfort zone. And your comfort zone, for me, the comfort zone is not doing everything, doing the same thing. For me, doing the same thing is troublesome. But I see what you mean. I think it's not a matter of an artist has to keep a style or has to change. It's neither, because both are hard. You know, if you can make good work forever with the same style, and it's always alive, so to speak, because I think the work has a life of its own. If the work is alive, still, if it's clinging, then you're fine. You don't have like to try to do something different for the sake of doing different, because then you're doing just like you're caring too much about the style. If you try too hard to change the style, you're giving the style too much importance. And in the other hand, if you want to change it, and it's alive, and it makes sense within what you have to say, like, then it's not. And it's a good time now for contemporary art, because it's a good and a bad time, because you really can go around style as much as you want. I remember when I started that I said that I made like, I had my style, my contemporary art, like teenager style. It was so important to have a brand, like back in the 90s, when people started discussing this, like the brands of the artist. And when a work is based on the brand, like just an artist selling the style again, you feel it. You just feel it. You feel that it's not, you know, it's not, it loses the sparkle. If the style is a motivation, you can feel it, I think.
In the United States, I don't know if it's true for every country, but there is a definite sort of condescension or discouragement of female artists to have a lot of emotion or drama or just sort of a hysterical quality to the work. That is something that is not really promoted. And when you said, but at the same time, as an artist, people are always asking me, I guess curators mostly, well, what's the work about? And if I said, well, it's just about the shape of the sculpture or the materiality, or I wanted to use a stone, I just never feel like I could get away with that. And obviously, it's sort of human nature to come up with a context, and what does this mean, or how do I interpret it, what does it mean to me, which is nice for the viewer. But as the artist, it doesn't seem like you feel any pressure to put that story together. And I just wondered if there was some relationship to the simplicity of your explanation about the work, that I wanted to refer to sculpture. It's like, you know.
It's so obvious, but for some reason it's not so obvious these days. Like, I don't really listen to people saying that much, because there is some, a need to justify. So what I'm saying the most obvious thing, but I don't know why. There is such a strong need to justify, like, the making of art, that it's very rare that you make art, because art is the system that you respond to. And that is my main motivation. There is this thing with associations, like I couldn't do abstract sculpture, for instance, because I really enjoy associating shapes to symbols, like the turtle and everything that comes with it. I do some relief works on the wall that are like a piece of clay with holes in it. Sometimes they can look like a book. Sometimes they can look like makeup like a makeup thing, like a eyeshadow thing. They can look like so many different things. And these associations that they look like food sometimes, like a pie. These associations that come and go, that I can associate like them with Instagram or something I saw, or some emotion I felt, or something I bought. This makes sense to me, like to associate it with real life. Abstract art doesn't make so much sense for me, even if I enjoy it. So I'm really like jumping between meaning and non-meaning. And that makes sense to me. But I see what you mean. But in the other hand, I would say that women artists are encouraged to do some drama and hysteria right now, because there's so much importance given like to how many women are in a show, or have you included women artists in your show, blah, blah, blah. And for me, that's patronizing. For me, I feel like very uneasy with that. So I'm never talking about that, because it doesn't occur to me to talk about like what a woman, you know, as a woman. I don't feel myself like in a woman position. I feel like I'm in an artist position. And of course, I think it's a privilege. I think there is problematic there. But in my practice, I don't think about like the woman problematics. But I see what you mean. Also, there is something that I've got this conversation with people from the States many times. Like when people visit in São Paulo, they ask, how is it to be a woman artist here? And I say, actually, it's kind of easier than to be a male artist, because it would be, art school would be for girls, because they would be art teachers. And for guys, it would be much harder for the parents to approve a boy, teenager going to art school. They would be a bit, you know, say, no, this is for girls, this is a girl thing. And so it's easier there for women to go study art. It's a crazy, totally different Latin context.
Could we talk a little bit about paper mache?
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I could see all kinds of philosophical things about you making things that look like something, but it's paper mache. But the emotional aspect of it, because it's a childhood material too.
Yeah.
And when I see it, I think of Brazil and Carnival and the floats made out of paper mache. So what's your emotional connection to?
Oh, it's very satisfying. Because after making a lot of bronze, because bronze would give me so many things that I needed as tradition, as making a statement, making a very strong statement with something very simple. Like if I do one of these clay snakes, I've never done this, I have to do some, but if I do a clay snake and make it in bronze, I'm making a very strong statement about what I mean is serious or something. But papier-mâché is the other direction, is going like something I can do at home from start to end. And that's like very, very satisfying and very liberating, because and I think the work that having made such a big work like the turtle from papier-mâché, I think it's very much a result of this freedom of say I can make it as big as I want. So because I can make it here, you know, it's very cheap and it's just newspaper. And yeah, so it's not really newspaper only, but there's a structure inside, because but this is very liberating to be able to do something. And I'm anxious too. Sometimes I want something to get done. Like I don't want to send it to the foundry. I really want to start something and finish here and get it done. So that's a very good friend.
You're still using actual newspaper instead of fancy art paper?
Fancy art, the newspaper.
Yeah.
I made a performance once that the actor would tell a joke about what newspaper I was using, because there was one that was softer, and I went that far to talk about which newspaper was best for papier-mâché. Yeah, there's some joking around that.
Is there anything like a universal artist, or each artist is actually from Brazil or from India or from USA?
That's a hard one. I think both. Well, I think we are who we are, and we are local. But art is in the best. I tend to believe that art is a universal system. Like it's a human thing. I tend to believe that. Maybe I'm like, I don't know. But so maybe it's the way I see it, it's a mix of both. It's a local person relating to a universal system. I say it's universal not because it was imposed, globalized, but it's because I think it's a very human need, an impulse. And, you know, because of the caveman that took a while to the caveman to start drawing. But once he started, couldn't stop it. And so that's why I think it's both local and universal.
One more.
Latching on to, oh, sorry, did you want to go ahead? Latching on to this question, I guess I would agree that there's a universal kind of need and to some degree vocabulary, blah, blah, blah. There are also more and more universal or global pressures that artists obviously need to negotiate and deal with. And I just wondered if you wanted to say a bit more about, you mentioned the Brazilian context and the kind of social and political context at the moment, which is, again, a very local, but at the same time a very global, you know, context. So how do you relate to that, or are these any of these works a response to that, or some intervention to some degree?
It might respond to that in a very subtle way, as I don't feel, and I feel some guilt these days that I'm not sure I would like to feel. I would like to get rid of it. Like sometimes, I remember when we had the riots in like 2015. I remember I was scrolling Facebook down, and everything was happening very much on Facebook. It was like a Facebook revolution. And I really felt for a moment that I would have to find another profession. And that's, again, what I was saying about this fragility of the art importance and the art as a system, that we really have this impression sometimes that it can go down, like it can disappear in a minute. I don't like feeling that. Like, I don't want to go there, because I think it always comes back. This autonomy and this importance, as I was saying, like independent of the context of the circumstances. So I grab it and I try to stand there, you know, with this thing. And I tend to go like more and more essential and less connected to the storm in those moments. That's my very specific way of dealing with it, because I see people going, of course, full on. And in bringing the discussion into the work, I didn't find a way to bring the discussion into the work, because it would really smash my work down, I think. The discussion is the discussion. But it's an expensive place to be, I think, you know. Sometimes I feel uneasy. I feel like, you know, why am I doing this? Why am I allowed to do this in such a dark scenario? But it comes back. Like I tend to come back to the surface and say, no, you've got to do this. Somebody's got to do this. Philosophers and artists, they've got to do this. That's their...
One more little question about your creative process. If I understood it right, when you were in London, you somehow had a hard time. And then when you went back to Brazil, you felt better. And what you were doing in London, you felt it deeply inappropriate and not good, not satisfying, at least for you, of course. Let's see if it's truth. And then when you went back to Brazil, you finally felt good and you started loving what you did. So what I'm asking you now is the art you do, what you do is your production comes from pleasure and a good mood, or from pain?
I can talk forever about this feeling bad in London and Brazil thing. If we have time, I will. But from... 5 to 10 more minutes. Okay.
Maybe 15 maximum.
I can talk forever about two things. But from pain or comfort, I prefer comfort. I meditate because I prefer to find something in the
this is what we were going to, so that your production comes from pleasure and good feeling.
I try to find pleasure because I believe that pleasure is smarter than pain. No, because it's a choice. I mean, some people won't agree, but yeah, we could finish with that.
I very much like the idea of your work being meaningless, because it makes you free as an artist, and it also makes me free as a viewer. So that's what I actually like most.
Thank you. And you, as a free viewer, you see it's not completely meaningless. Do you agree?
Because it's, you know, but I'm free
You're free
to
to
think
associate.
what I want to associate, and you're free to do what you want.
Good. Yeah, we've got a deal.
A lot of art, they say, comes out of pain. You know, coming back to your last answer about pleasure being the real motivator. So, poets, for example, come from a broken place. You know, the words which flow out sometimes are the most powerful when they come from a broken place. So, isn't that true for artists also?
That words come from a broken place, like from a painful place? It might, yeah. I think it might come from a broken place, but it's just that I have this impression that there is not a lot of wisdom in pain. That pain can show you things, and you from finding a better place for you to stand. There's some wisdom in finding a nicer place to be in the face of pain. It's not that life is not going to be like painless, but even the poet, like if writing about pain, I imagine. I don't read much poetry, but just as an association. The poet will find graceful, and graceful meaning intelligent form and shape and language and interesting play with words when he's a little bit better. I don't think the artist is destroyed when he's fine. The moment we are finding something, we are already like putting some light in the picture, I think. But this is a very strong belief of mine, that pain is a place where you don't see very well when you're in pain. You're in physical pain. You're not seeing very well. And art is one of these things that help us negotiate existence, I think. So it has to be it's maybe coming out of the pain process, but not going into the pain. I don't know, but this is something like we can talk about this forever too, right?
I think we've reached the end. We're running out of time, so I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming here.
This was fun. This was a lot of fun. I talked a lot.
I know you're shy, but I hope you enjoyed it.
No, I did.